All right. I am thrilled to join my friend Chris Thomas, Super Bowl athlete, on non-consensus investing. So, the best investment is investment in human capital. It's investing in oneself and those around us. I've known Chris for a long time, and Chris has a life before the NFL, during the NFL, and after the NFL. He retired from football, and he's got a champion mindset, and he also focuses his time and effort on inculcating a high performance athletic mindset in the next generation of talent. So we're going to talk about a wide range of events. I think starting with his experience in the Super Bowl and his formative events, what shaped him, and I think there's a lot of meaning in this for anyone that's looking to improve and level themselves up and really understand like what it is for an athlete or anyone that aspires to do great things to go through that journey and what that means and what the burden of that means also. So thank you, Chris. Chris, do you have a ring, by the way, that you can show us?
I do. I'm wearing it specifically for you. So it is my Super Bowl ring from my time with the Rams. If you can see it, it's got 152 diamonds on it. Really special. It's funny because I've told this story before, but you can actually see the Rams possibly right there.
My eyes are I'm getting blinded here by the light.
Yeah, you can see the Rams right there. But I've told this story before. Anytime I do wear the ring, and it's not really my personality to wear the ring. I'm not that guy, except
Right.
in events where I know people would be interested to see it. But more than the jewelry, it's really the journey, right? So more than the jewelry, it's really the journey that defines so much of why I got the ring, right? So yeah, it's cool, but it's really I'm most proud of what I had to overcome to get to the point where I could achieve the ring.
So let's get into that. I believe that anyone that has accomplished anything meaningful in life has had some formative experiences in their childhood. So what was the first real challenge that you had to deal with?
Well, when I was a young kid, my father died when I was 3 years old. So we grew up in a not so nice area in Southern California, just outside of LA. And my father died when I was 3. And I really only have 3 memories of him. One being bounced on his chest or belly, one sitting on his lap in like this old, I'm guessing like Ford truck that was like bluish green, pretending to drive and we're having a good time. And then the other where I was in bed with my brother and sister and we were giggling and we got whooped for giggling. So I have 3 very different memories of my father. And I will say that without knowing who my father was in great detail at the time, as I grew up and I was, the product of a single mother trying to raise 3 kids at the age of 26 by herself with no higher education. And I have a very interesting family dynamic because my father, was Black, African-American. My mother is Spanish, French, and Guatemalan. So, here we are with a Spanish, French, and Guatemalan mother, raising 3 Black kids. And so, in my household, education wasn't really promoted because that was not the Spanish culture of my family dynamic. It was all about love and togetherness and, my mom making sure that she was present. So because of that, she didn't really get a job, that she could, be in for a 9 to 5er, right? She wanted to make sure that when we got out of school, like she was present, she was there. We were always together. But we grew up in a neighborhood that was fairly tough and challenging, and that made us tough. And so I credit that environment a lot because I learned to be very tough and thick-skinned. I mean, not an exaggeration. It wasn't uncommon that in any given week we were, throwing blows with somebody else, 4 times a week. It just was very standard. And so you learn to be tough. And I was not a big kid. I was a very skinny, small, frail kid. But I learned to be a very tough kid. So I say all that to say,
Chris, was that bullying? Was that bullying or just like neighborhood street fight? Like, what was that about?
Definitely was not bullying unless, you considered your older brother picking on you bullying. And I don't even know that he picked on me. It was just, I probably was instigating it half the time. You know what I mean? But he was so much bigger than me that I couldn't beat him up. And so maybe it's you just deciding to go vent that or project that somewhere else. But it was always, when I was playing with other kids, you're playing with kids that are 2 years younger than you and 6 years older than you. And there's no judicious process they use to decide who they're going to, pick
Right.
on, or who they're going to push on the concrete when you're playing two-hand football. So you really have two choices, right? It was a different era. Like, you defend yourself and you respond to that, or you go home crying to your mom, who wasn't going to in turn go to someone's house and knock on their door and say, hey, your little Johnny hurt my little Johnny, so I'm going to sue you. Or what do you have to say about that? It was like, Mom, this kid just pushed me down on the concrete. Okay, well, did you not want to play anymore? It's like that was the response. Like, do you want to play?
Experience from a single mom, and you were like Mowgli in the Jungle Book, thrown into the jungle. You had your brothers who were your friends, allies, and sometimes they're beating on you. And, you had to assert yourself and carve out your own space in this challenging world.
Oh yeah. There was a level of respect you had to gain, where people did not feel like you were a target enough that they would come at you every single day. Right. So there was definitely a level of respect that you had to gain. And I do think that now, as I look back, I do think that not having a father figure in my life until I was then 11, it definitely, that absence, I think, made me a little rambunctious, right? I needed, I think, that father figure, as I look back, that I think would have really tempered me a little bit and drawn some lines, right? But it's funny because I think those young people who have grown up without fathers, we think that we were missing something, right? Like, if I only had a dad, and if he could have been there, like, my life would have been different, or I could have had his influence. But then, what does that really mean? Do you really know what the influence would have been? And as I look back on my life, as I would learn, my father was not a very good, human being in regards to his influence on my mom and on us. And I would learn things later on that I'm grateful he was not in our lives, right? Like, had he been in our lives, Chris Thomas would have turned out as a very, very different human being.
You would have had a different role model, and maybe not
100%. And that role model would not have been a positive influence at all on my life. And truth be told, the best thing that ever happened to my life was my stepfather coming into our lives and taking us out of where we grew up and taking us to an entirely different city and area, and culture that started framing who I eventually would become in a very positive way at age 10 or 11.
Let's get to that. So how do you go from, tough neighborhood, now stepfather enters the picture, and then you join the NFL? How did you realize that dream?
So it's funny. So we played a lot of football when I was growing up as a kid in the street, and the Rams were my team. So, wearing a Super Bowl ring with the Rams is like a dream come true. But, I just saw it on TV and I was captivated by that game. I was like, I want to play that, and I want to be Eric Dickerson, right? Who was the running back for the Rams. He's in the Hall of Fame now. And that guy was like the dream player for me. And I'm like, when I can finally play football, I want to be Eric Dickerson. And I couldn't play football until I was a freshman in high school. My mom would not allow it. So I just knew that I was going to be the next ED, as we called him, right? And what I didn't really consider is that Eric Dickerson was 6'3", 235. And my first time playing football, I was 5'5", $118, right? And I got pads that are supposed to go just under my chest plate, and they're going down to my rib cage, or the bottom of my rib cage, the top of my stomach. And my thigh pads were not just thigh pads, they're like thigh and knee pads. Like, I could hardly hold my pants up. It was like, if you thought about a belt, right? And you go into the very last notch on the belt, like, that's where I was.
Wow.
Right? And I didn't know how to play the game. I really didn't know how to play it in a structured environment where there were rules and positions and responsibilities. I was playing on grass and beaten up by the other kids on the field, with what I could do, but this was different, and I was not good, right? I was a third string running back, and I ended up starting on defense. But about halfway through that season, when I was a freshman, I was asked to go back and catch this punt, right? And I'd never done that before in a game. And if you've never attempted to catch a punt, I swear it's like you have vertigo, right? Like, you're looking up and the ball's going like this, and you're trying to stay with it. And so it's very new to me. And I attempted to catch it. The ball went through my arms, through my legs, but touched my leg. And as I attempted to go jump on the ball, because obviously that's a fumble the second it touches your leg or any part of your body, the other team recovered it on like our 4-yard line. So as I come off the sideline, the assistant head coach does not think that I'm trying hard enough to catch the ball. And so he sees to it that I'm benched for the entire rest of the season.
Oh, wow. From one accident, your first time on the field.
Yes.
You learned the wrong lesson from that coach.
I did, right? And it's funny you say that, because two things happen in today's day and age with a coach like that. One, athletes quit because they see the hill as being too high to climb to figure out how to be really good in this game and get what they want. So the obstacle seems too large. And so the easy path of resistance is to just retreat and go do something else, right? But you lose so much in doing that for so many reasons. But that's the first thing too. It sends the wrong message. What it tells you is that you are incapable of making a mistake. And if you make a mistake, there's severe consequences to that, right? And so I guess fortunately for me, I was too naive and I was too hungry to play the game that I ignored that. So, right, I came back for year two as a sophomore in high school, and I was now like 5'10", $140. So by no means am I the Rock, right? But I'm bigger, and so I look more the part, and I'm not playing varsity, I'm on JV. And I was, it was an inconsequential year. I was fine. I was a fine player on JV. I played strong safety. It was fine. Fast forward to my junior year, I'm now, 6 foot, $160. We have all these seniors on our varsity team, and so it's even hard to break into the starting lineup, but I did as a free safety on defense. And I was one of 3 juniors starting on an all-senior team. Our team was really good, had one of the better defenses in the state of California. And I was just a piece of that. I by no means was like the face of our defense. I was just a piece of that, and very not intimidating. Again, I hadn't lifted a weight at that time. I was just showing up and playing football and was pretty good at it by that time. And so after that year, we have a very successful season. Again, defense is one of the best in the state. And this is when all the attention starts. So I literally started getting letters from everybody across the country. And by that time, I'd established that Miami was my dream school, by the way, right? And that was a one school I did not
seeing the talent, and they're saying, hey, look, come to our school, play in our program.
Yeah, it was different. Recruiting was different then, right? Like, typically speaking, you would get letters that were all generic, right? That a lot of kids got across the country, but then you get the handwritten ones, and those are the ones that meant something. And so when I say that I got letters from everybody across the country except Miami, my dream school, I literally got letters from everybody across the country except Miami, my dream school.
That was another disappointment in a string of disappointments thus far.
Yeah. So thus far, like, nothing had really been great about my experience with football, except now, like, I'm getting this attention, and now I'm getting these handwritten letters from schools across the country. And the only schools you thought about were the major programs, right? No one thinks about, like, when you think about getting a new car, like, you think about the best car. You're not thinking about, the car that, is a Suzuki Samurai that you'll be taking, that thing will break down in 6 months, right? So you're thinking about the biggest schools. And so as those letters started coming, I thought, hey, I'm writing my ticket. Like, this, like, it's happening. Like, this dream of going to the NFL, right? There's a certain path you got to take, right? And the path I thought about when I was a freshman in high school is, hey, I'm going to play high school football. I'm going to be a superstar. I'm going to be so good that everybody wants me. I'm going to choose Miami. I'm going to go to Miami. I'm going to be a starting wide receiver there for 4 years. Then I'll be a first-round draft choice. Then I'm going to go to the NFL. I'm going to start for 10 years. I'm going to be a Pro Bowler for 4 or 5. I'll retire. Make the Hall of Fame. Right. You know what I mean?
Everyone's got a plan until they're punched in the face.
Yeah, exactly, right? And so this is the vision you have, which is where the energy comes from, right? It's like, this is where the excitement is created, because you're like, okay, I'm just naive enough to believe that this is going to happen for me in a straight line because I want it for 1 and because I'm good for 2, right? I'm just naive enough to truly believe that. And then you're following this path, and finally you see, like, oh, wow, well, I just got on that pathway now with all this attention. And so it's going to happen for me. Step 1, phase 1 is going to happen. And then, I go into my senior year. I pretty much am expecting to be able to write my ticket. My senior year, I have a really good year, both offensively and defensively. So I play offense for the first time. Fall in love with wide receiver. I'm like, I will never play defense again. I love wide receiver. Catching the ball, juking guys, scoring touchdown, crowds going nuts. Every girl wants to know your name, right? Like, they don't want to know the defensive guy's name. They want to know the offensive. So I was like, I fell in love with wideout, and I'm like, I'll never play defense again. Season's over. I did everything I needed to do to ensure that phase 2 was going to happen, right? Go to the school of my choice. Wasn't going to be Miami, but I knew I was going to go to this major university. And so the recruiting window opens up, and as it's opened up, I'm talking to nobody, right? And so because I don't know the recruiting process, I don't read too much into it until 2 or 3 weeks go by and I've talked to no one. So I get really nervous about this. I'm like, I'm pretty sure like I should have talked to somebody by now. So then I reach out to this assistant head coach for our team, and I call him, and the first thing out of his mouth was, "Hey, how are your talks going with the schools?" And I'm like, "Coach, that's what I'm talking about. Like, what talks?" And he's like, "The talks with the schools coming to see you." He's like, and I'm like, "Coach, what schools?" And he's like, "Chris, the school's coming to see you. How are the talks going?" I'm like, "Well, Coach, that's why I'm calling. I've actually not talked to anyone." He's like, "You've not talked to any of these schools?" And I'm like, "No." And he goes, "Harvey didn't tell you that was our head coach?" And I'm like, "No." He starts reeling off UCLA, USC, Washington State, Oregon State, Utah, San Diego State, all these schools in the Midwest. Like, they've come to talk to you. You haven't talked to any of them. I'm like, "No." He goes, "Listen, you need to go talk to Harvey to find out what's going on." So I'm a little taken aback that wasn't brought to my attention until now. But then I have a coach who's like unapproachable, right? And for a number of different reasons, I'll spare the details, but he was thought to not be a very good man, and that would come to be realized in some ways in his life. But I was figuring out as a 17-year-old kid, like, how am I going to go approach this guy? He should have told me about all these schools, and he hasn't, right? And so as I'm planning on doing this the next day, I get approached by a teammate who says, "Hey, one of our teammates was there when UCLA came to see you, and he overheard our head coach tell UCLA that he did not think you could play Division I, so they left." And so that's where it all began. So that's where the crossroad of my life really happened, was that point where everything that I had envisioned happening, everything I dreamed of, looked like it was over. I almost quit football because I was really discouraged.
Right.
But I continued playing, definitely not on the path that I envisioned. I went the junior college route, which led me to Division II football, not Division I, which led me to 1 year to 4-year school, really giving me the chance to become an NFL prospect my junior year.
You had a lot of tenacity. You had a role model. You had a vision. I want to play this role. You stayed on that. You had setback after setback after setback, but like water moving around a rock, you just stayed on it and kept marching forward towards your vision.
Yeah, with nothing in that vision initially being realized. Everything was a detour to distraction, right?
It's so much like entrepreneurship. You talked about how you didn't have permission to fail early on. And entrepreneurship is about fast experiments, failing quickly, learning quickly. 2, you talk about being naive enough. And entrepreneurship, you got to be a little crazy and maybe a bit irrational or not around that. And 3rd, you had a vision. And I think great founders always have models of leadership that they look up to. And you also talked about how vision inspires, and that vision pulled you forward, even though your current circumstances aren't what they wanted it to be, and they weren't on the path that you thought you would be taking.
Yeah, and at some point, it's funny because the vision's there, right? The goal's there. And at some point, you forget about it, especially when you get derailed. You're just like, my objective right now is to move forward with the fervor necessary to be the best version of myself. And in my case, it's football. For an entrepreneur's case, it's whatever they decided is the product or the pathway or whatever, right? But for me, it was like, I just need to continue moving forward, despite the fact that I don't know necessarily if that dream's even alive anymore until after my junior year in college. And then all of a sudden you have this huge year, your only year at a 4-year school, that turns you into a 3rd or 6th round draft prospect. You're like, oh my gosh, well, now it's become real. Well, how do I know it's real? Because there are NFL scouts sitting on the rails watching Chris Thomas at spring football. Like, now it's tangible, right? Now it's real. And so I worked so hard for this to happen. I'm all excited. Go into my senior year in college. 3 games into my senior year, I suffer a season-ending injury, and my season's over with. So, talk about being discouraged, defeated. It was a low point. Yeah, it was a low point. I mean, whatever you could equate that to, in regards to someone attempting to start a business, like, it felt like the dream was over, and I was devastated. Only to find out months later that through being victimized in my head, right, I held on to feeling like something was stolen from me. I really held on to that while I was attempting to recover from this injury. I have these NFL workouts that none of which are going well. Every day of my life, I was holding on to, I shouldn't be in this position. this should have worked out differently.
So
Why am I
you
here?
kind of resented the universe for the circumstances and the injury, and kind of woe is me, you know, what did I do to deserve this, and kind of upset and anger. That was the
100%. Yeah, I mean, I was very resentful, and I'm a faith-based person, so God is my foundation. So I felt betrayed by God, to be honest with you.
wow.
I felt like I've tried to live this life that is representing you, right, and everything I do, and yet at every turn, when I'm doing what I think I'm supposed to do, you won't do what you're supposed to
Wow.
do, right?
Interesting. Yeah.
And so it's really fascinating because I truly felt like that. Like, hey, if I just do my part, you're supposed to do your part the way
There's a
I
bargain,
see.
there's a covenant. I lived a
Yeah.
good life. I did the right. It really is like Job. I think
Yes.
there's a movie coming out about Job soon.
Yes. Yes.
So
Like,
how did you, by the way, I think many people fall into this trap of the victim mindset and they can't get out of it. And I know you coach athletes on mindset and performance, and people fall into self-deception and traps that limit their human potential. And that limits the growth of, human capital and unlocking the magic that everyone has to offer the world and, their talent. So how did you get out of that mindset to the other side?
because I almost lost the dream. So this is basically what happened was as I was trying to recover, and these NFL workouts are now popping up for me in the early spring, late winter of my senior year in college, where it all seems like it's all for naught. I can't have these good workouts. My body's not fully recovered yet. I just see the dream slipping away. I'm angry every day. I have to go out here and perform on surfaces that aren't really tailored to, like, for me being my best on in my times that I'm being measured by and everything else. And just one day I have my last private NFL workout and I literally quit it. I still to this day cannot believe that it happened, but I'd reached a point where, like, I was done. I'd been through too much. And I'm like,
Wow.
this is ridiculous. And basically what happened was I slipped attempting to do these drills that he was asking me to do. I'm not a guy who slipped. I'd slipped three times in a row. By the third time, I went and sat down and took off my cleats and did not even look at this man. And he's like, what are you doing? I said, I'm done. He goes, excuse me? And I said, I'm done. He goes, are you sure? And I said, yeah, I'm done. And so he left. And I was so angry. I was so out of my mind, and literally it was like an out of body experience that I didn't even understand the potential consequence of that. And thankfully, it's weird how people come into your lives, but we had a coach who had been in the NFL, played for the Redskins, came back to coach at my school for 1 year. That was his first year there. And he was mentoring me through all this stuff. And as he saw this transpire, he gave me about 5 minutes, and it's so out of character for me, right, to have done that. He comes over to me and sits down and says, Chris, I know you're frustrated. I get it. I totally understand it. But if you ever do that again, you might never play in the NFL. He goes, you might not play now because you just did that. And so this was a poignant moment because I had to go home and I had to determine how I was going to move forward, or if I would move forward, right? At that point, I had victimized myself and I was holding on to this anger, this resentment for me not having the path that I should have had in my eyes to still keep this dream alive. And it was holding me back. And at that moment, I had to go, I'm not sure what I'm moving forward towards, but I know that I'm losing with the mentality that I have right now.
The vision was kind of receding the distance, and he gave you more tough love. I mean, he held you accountable to your own vision. He didn't say you should have done this, you should have done that. He said, look, you're not going to accomplish what you want to accomplish with that behavior.
Oh, yeah. And one of the hardest things to ever do is move forward to vulnerability when you feel like the only thing that can be done is for you to be let down. Right. And that's honestly how I felt. Like, well, what am I going to have all this positive energy for when there's nothing in my pathway that looks like I can even achieve the dream? But if I hold on to that, I'm going to lose. So the only thing I can do is continue moving forward with the expectation that if I do my part, that the universe will do its part, and wherever it's not supposed to be is going to happen. And that's what happened. 5 teams wanted to sign me as a free agent. I didn't get drafted, but 5 teams wanted to sign me as a free agent. I only chose the Chargers because at the time they were in San Diego, and they were the only Cali team that wanted me. So I chose them and chose maybe the worst circumstance I could have ever walked into.
Should we go there, or should we talk about, what the Super Bowl experience is like for the average person?
I'd say maybe go there and I'll make this really quick so that you can understand. But I walked into a situation where I was one of 16 wide receivers fighting for 5 spots. And they had 5 guys coming back from the year before. So logic would tell you that if they liked those guys the year prior to my arrival, that why wouldn't they like those guys again upon my arrival? So as we're all there, and there's 11 of us rookies there, the odds don't look good. But then as a wide receiver, if anyone does not understand this, we want numbers that are 80-something, teen-something, single-digit numbers. But when I looked at my locker, they gave Chris Thomas number 47. And I'm like, ooh, that's not a wide receiver number. But I don't know what to make of it yet until I got in the receiver room. That's when I did the head count. There's 16 guys here. That's not good. Oh, there's 5 guys coming back. That's not good. And no one has a number like Chris Thomas. That's not good. And then we go out for a 3-day 5-practice camp. And I literally got 2 repetitions of anything. Like I literally stood there as a kid on the other side of the fence wanting to play basketball with everybody else, but they won't invite me. Like that's what it felt like. And I've never felt more embarrassed in my life, honestly, at just what people must have thought of me. And I wasn't in a great, mental space because I was still recovering from this injury. I still wasn't back to full. So I didn't know what to make of it. And it wasn't until a couple months passed by, I got a chance to get myself in better psychological shape, that I went home and had the epiphany that would change my life. I went home for training in preparation for training camp, which is where you basically make or not make a team, right? You have a month and a half to basically tie it all together in front of all these people that are measuring everything you do. Like they catalog everything you do. And I was literally a forgotten player, but I went home going, okay, they're going to give me 1 repetition every practice, 1. And with that 1 repetition in training camp that they give me, I need to show them why they need to see Chris Thomas again. And I can't be like everybody else. I got to become something that other people won't. So I trained like that. I literally trained with the intention to challenge my threshold in ways I didn't think other people would allow themselves to do. And I did not hold on to the things that I couldn't control. I promise you, everybody else went home going, I'm not getting the reps. They're not going to give me the chance. I'm better than these guys. And at the end of the day, that might be true. But your reality is they're going to give you 3 reps of practice. So how are you preparing for those reps? And I prepared for mine. But when those 2 months were up that I was preparing at home, I woke up one morning. We were about 3 days out from camp starting. I looked in the mirror and I realized in that moment that I had turned myself into somebody I'd never been. And I was like, oh my gosh, like only this circumstance would allow Chris Thomas to discover the person that I'm seeing right now. And this is the victory. And in that moment, everything changed. I mean, I went into the summer with the intention to prove that I needed more reps and to prove that I was good enough for them to see me again. But in that moment, I realized I don't need to prove anything. I've won. I'm one of 1,700 guys on the planet who's going to be in a training camp in the NFL. And if they give me reps, I'm ready for them. If they don't, does that really change the person that I've created in front of me? And this is what life is about. It's about personal discovery and what we do when we discover the contribution we can be making to the universe. And I was ready to make it in this fashion if they'd allow me. But I'm not going to let that take away anything about what I'm just discovering if they don't. So I went into camp free. I was like so free and fearless to pursue the things that I wanted. And basically, as I envisioned it, that's what happened. They gave me 1 rep every practice. But with that 1 rep, because I feared nothing, I basically went out and did exactly what I should have done and made them go, oh, I wonder if he can do it again. And then I did it again. I did it again. I did it again. And all of a sudden, I'm taking some other guy's rep and some other guy's rep and some other guy's rep. And in the NFL, you start out with 90 guys. You got to cut down to 53. Before you do that, you cut down to 65. They cut down to 65. 6 wide receivers left standing. I was one of them. It was me and this other rookie that they loved. Up until that point, we had played 3 preseason games, which is kind of where you audition, but we didn't get a chance to play at all. The last preseason game was going to be ours, all to ourselves in the 4th quarter. He gets in, I get in. They try 5 or 6 times to get this guy the ball because they love this guy. They wanted him to be the guy to take that last slot. He can't make a play for a number of reasons. I get 1 ball thrown to me late in the 4th quarter, right down the middle of the field. I jump up, I catch it, and make no mistake about it, you're fighting the urge to go like, my whole life is dependent on this 1 catch, right? Like you feel it and you got to fight.
In your head? Like, is that thought going through your head at that moment?
100%. Like it's slowed down enough that you can think of everything that has happened at this point and the emotional tie to it, right? Like don't screw this up, man. It's coming down to this. You can't drop it. And you have to fight that negative dialogue.
How do you do that? How do you stay focused and present and don't let the voice distract you from the mission?
Because you realize that goes back to the epiphany that I had, the revelation I had before I went to camp. I realized that I wasn't any longer doing it to show them anything. I was doing it for my own personal victories. And this was going to be one of my personal victories, to be bigger than the circumstance, right? To be able to go to a place where I allowed it to be about me. And because I could do that, I was able to get myself back to the connection with the ball. And I jumped up, caught it, fell down for a 26-yard gain. Next day was cut day. This other kid and I were roommates. They call and they say, bring your playbook. The coach wants to see you, and that's how you know it's over. It's a horrible, horrible thing. But in our circumstance, it was even worse because we know when the phone rings, it's for one of us. One of us is going home, right? Because we're roommates.
Intense.
Phone rings. Yeah, phone rings. I'm the closest one to the phone. It's one of those situations where you're like, I don't want to answer it. But then again, I don't want him answering it and telling me, hey, Chris, it's for you. You know what I mean? So I pick up the phone. It's the Grim Reaper on the other end. And he goes, hey, it's Marty Herney. I'm like, hey, Mr. Herney, it's Chris Thomas. Hey, Chris, hey, I just want to tell you something. We like you a lot. We like what you've done. Because of that, we're going to keep you here. I need to talk to Wade. And so I gave him the phone. He unfortunately had that conversation of bring your playbook. Coach wants to see you. That would end his bid to become an NFL player. And that would begin my 8-year career.
Wow.
And so this is how my career began, thinking it was the most poignant moment, but it wasn't. Really, what I took from the NFL was what happened to me 3 years later in San Francisco after spending 2 years with the Chargers and losing a Super Bowl against the Niners, who at that time were the best organization in the NFL, literally, because they had won a Super Bowl. And I go there where I show up for a one-day workout where I was supposed to fly up, work out, fly home, where they literally told my agent, we are not signing your client. So I knew that.
They told your agent before you flew out?
Yes.
And what are they going to do with this workout? They're going to watch you work out? What does that have to do with your performance on the field?
Because what they'll do is they'll then put you in a Rolodex if they like you in the event guys get hurt during training camp or guys get hurt in camp and they need somebody else to come in. And rarely, by the way, Ram, if you're that guy, will you ever make a team. You're just like a service guy. They're bringing you in to be an extra body.
Utility player, right.
Yes, because they can't afford to lose bodies. So you're really coming in to be an extra body. And so, again, I go up there and I anticipate that they're not signing me. And so I just say, listen, this could be it. Like, you can never, ever make another NFL team. And I don't want you to be scared of losing something. So I went up there with the intention to just be able to walk away and say, I was not scared to be my best, right? I was not scared of the unknown. And so because of that, I had the workout of my life, which led them to turn around and say, hey, would you mind sticking around for our 3-day camp that's about to start tomorrow? So I didn't even sign a regular NFL contract. I signed a 3-day NFL contract. That was it. I didn't even know those things existed, right? And so now I agree to stay there. I have no clothes, no nothings. I was supposed to fly home. But now I'm there. They have to cut somebody in order for me to be on the team because, again, you can only have 90 guys. At that time, they had all 90 guys. So they had to figure out who to cut. Now we're adding another wideout. Because they were intrigued by me, they wanted to see me more. And they had seen me twice that day, by the way. The defensive coordinator for the Niners later that afternoon had approached me to ask me if I could work out against an NFL starting defensive back that they were bringing in from the Vikings. And I'll be totally honest with you. My instinct was to be like, you are crazy. I just had the workout of my life. I don't want to do this again. You know what I mean? Like, no.
Yeah, you're shot. Also, they're done. Right.
Yeah, like I'm done. Like all the energy you have to invest in that and the focus, I don't want to do it again. But you can't say that. So I had to do it again in front of the same 12 people that are watching my workout. And by the way, it is intimidating. You got 12 guys standing there. They don't say a word. They're just on the sideline.
Are you doing your own routine? You're like, oh, let me do the bench. Let me do some cardio now.
At that point, they don't have you do all of that. They just take a guy like me out on the field and they have the receiver coach come out with you. There's a quarterback and they basically tell you all these routes to run and every guy is charting everything. So they don't say a word.
I see. You're running plays.
Yes, basically routes. Yeah, routes. But they don't say a word. They're just all evaluating you, right? So it can be very intimidating, right? When you know,
for sure, you're not getting any feedback. You're in a vacuum, and then you have your kind of inner monologue and chatter.
Yes, And I had to do that twice in one day. So I had to do that twice. So I had to get myself ramped up. And now I'm going against somebody else, which is even more intense because one of us is not going to look good.
Right.
Right.
Salmon swimming up the stream. And now
Yes.
you get to the end, and there's a
Yes.
lot of obstacles on the way.
Yes.
And a lot of salmon that are qualified, and like this randomness, luck, perseverance, and drive. And
yes. So we go to do it again.
Good salmon too. Who knows, right?
Oh yeah. So we go to do it again. Yeah. And now I'm doing it in front of 13 people because now the defensive coordinator is there. So I'm doing it in front of the same 12 people who saw my workout and this guy. So he basically has me go up against this guy, and I'll fast forward. I basically destroyed this guy, play after play after play after play. And so they must have been going, who the heck is this kid we've never heard of who didn't play it down for 2 years in the Chargers organization? Who is this kid? So the intrigue elevated. They give me the next day in practice a bunch of reps against their number one defensive back, number two, number three. And in doing that, I basically do work against all of them. And I have great success against all of them, which leads to the next morning, me being called into the vice president's office. He sits me down and says, we'd like to offer you a 2-year contract with a signing bonus we said we wouldn't give you. So in a matter of a day and a half, my whole life is changing. And never could I have foreseen any of that, right?
And you said yes to things you thought about saying no to, like going to do the workout.
Yes.
And then saying again and leaning forward instead of talking yourself out of an opportunity.
Yes. And so now I'm about to join the best organization in football with a Hall of Fame quarterback, Steve Young, a Hall of Fame wide receiver, Jerry Rice. Could be a very intimidating environment, but I was so free emotionally that I was able to play the best football I've ever played in my entire life, and got preseason player of the game, our first preseason game, led us in every receiving category. And you would think that that's like a dream come true. But the moment I got preseason player of the game, the next day, the head coach started mother effing me. Like on a continuous weekly basis, 3 to 5 to 6 times a week, he would manufacture things to basically mother F me about on the field in front of everybody. And initially, it didn't bother me because it was so illogical. I was this humble, quiet, hardworking kid who was dominating on the field, do anything you asked me to do. So initially, it did not take my game away. But as I made the team and he continued to do it, it was 3 weeks into the season. I was supposed to get a rep in practice. He said, get out of there. He put in Jerry Rice. He didn't like my walk behind the huddle, so he mother effed me again. And at that point, he had done it probably 38 times.
You're getting verbally abused by the coach.
Yeah, and I don't say that because I'm not this sensitive person, but yeah, I mean, in truth, yeah, like he was absolutely just vehemently just mother effing me, right? Consistently. And there's nothing worse than like having no ability to retaliate.
Right.
There was nothing. I was so vulnerable because I had no power. I wasn't Jerry Rice. If I would have said one thing in return, that would have been the end of my career. Right. So time and time again, I'm just having to take these arrows, you know what I mean? And I'm trying to hold on to like my sense of self. I'm trying to hold on to my game, you know, because that's so disruptive to you, like being in this good space when you know that the person in control of your future now doesn't want you there. Yeah. Right. So every day you're trying to fight like this, dude, I can't mess this up because this guy doesn't like me. You know, I got to be perfect because it could cost me. Every day you're focused on living in this good space in spite of that being your reality. And so I'm just taking arrows, you know what I mean? And it's just like hitting me over and over again. But I'm like, hey, I'm still standing. Like, you're not breaking me. But it was hurting, you know, having to fight that hard because in truth, it was so illogical. I was doing everything right. I was a dream player. I was dominating.
How did you stay positive through that when you're getting on the field and you have that chatter in your head? How do you focus on what's in front of you and bring the best out in you despite taking the slings and arrows?
Because I'm a logical person and I was able to look at it logically and go, what am I doing to cause this? Like, what am I actually doing? Is it me? And the answer was unequivocally no. Like, it wasn't me. Like, literally everybody else loved me. It was him. And he had something against me. And
you also had Jerry Rice as the comp over here who, you know, that played a role into it too, right? So he's got his own perception there. But
yeah, it was horrible because I couldn't I mean, it made no sense, but ironically, because it made no sense, it's why I couldn't give it much credence, right? I figured it was something personal, but it was more on his end than mine
Right.
until here I am going to practice this one day. I'm supposed to get a rep. He tells me to get out of there. He puts in Jerry Rice, doesn't like my walk behind the huddle, and he mother F's me as I'm walking behind the huddle. And in that moment, I'm just like, I mean, I absolutely hate this dude. I would give anything to knock this guy out or to be able to respond, and I can't. And so what happened was I get the next play. I jog out to the right side of the field, and he's there. And so he's just looking at me. It's like we're in a tunnel, just he and I, and he's standing over there, and I'm jogging out, and I can see just the disdain he has for me and just how deep it is. And I recognized it, but I wasn't preoccupied with it. I then lined up, ran my route. Coincidentally, they throw me the ball, and coincidentally, I dropped it.
Okay.
And it wasn't a huge deal. I might have made so many plays, no one said a word, and even him. But when I went to go pick it up, this is the power of the mind. When I went to go pick it up, I thought to myself for 5 seconds, CT, this guy hates your guts. You start dropping balls, this guy's going to cut you and end your dream. That one thought, Rom, changed everything about how I would move forward. The very next day,
You held yourself accountable. I think that's what it goes back to. And I think the other part of it is not giving fear into other people's opinions. So gotcha.
I was good in that until that moment, but then everything changed. Like literally it changed in a day. Up until that point, he had no power to affect the way that I would perform. But in that one moment, I became very aware of his disdain for me and what I was about to potentially lose if I continued making mistakes or dropping balls, right? I hadn't dropped balls. So it was a perfect storm where I just coincidentally dropped one. He just yelled at me, mother F me. I picked it up and thought about the consequence. The next day, I no longer was focused on the desire for success. My energy went to what I was trying to not lose, right? And so all my energy and focus came, when I lined up was about, don't drop a ball, Chris. Well, not until that moment had I even thought about that for 6 months. But now all I can think about when I'm lining up is, don't drop a ball. He's going to end your dream. You're okay, but you got to make plays. And then all of a sudden you drop a ball. And you're like, oh, no. Don't do that, dude. Come on. Don't do that. Don't do this. Is going to end your dream. You can't do that. Come on. And then you line up again. And you're like, okay, don't drop another one. And then all of a sudden you drop another one. Like, oh my God, dude, come on. You can't do that. You're giving him the ammunition he needs to like cut you. Like, come on, you got to get it together. And because at the time I didn't know the mind, I didn't understand. I was creating this self-fulfilling prophecy, right? I was connecting myself to exactly what I didn't want.
Right. It's like driving a car, looking at the tree, you hit the tree.
Yes, that's exactly it. And I did not understand it at the time because I didn't understand the power of the mind, despite the fact that my first day in the NFL, the coach who walked in, the first statement out of his mouth was, the game's about to become 85% mental and 15% physical. No one knew what that meant, but now I'm about to live it, right? So every day I started dropping balls every single day. And every day it happened, I became more anxious about it until I did the one thing I thought would fix it was I got on this thing called a jugs machine, which shoots out a bunch of balls at you. And I'm like, I'll just spend 30 minutes on this before practice. That's going to solve the problem. I did it, felt like here's the solution. This is the magic wand. And then I go out and practice, and 10 minutes into it, I drop another ball. And that is when the hopelessness began. That is when the vulnerability. Oh, yeah. That is when the vulnerability began. And that is, truth be told, when my anxiety began. And at that time, no one talked about anxiety, right? And I didn't even understand I was having anxiety because I was unbreakable, right? I'm a tough football guy, and like nothing had ever shook me in my life. But now I have this knot in my stomach. I feel shaky at practice. I feel like my body's not cooperating. The ball's coming in and it looks like it's moving, like the simplest of catches I could not make. And it got so bad that all I would do when I'd show up at the complex, I would show up at 7:30 in the morning because we don't practice till 2:30 in the afternoon. I'd show up at 7:30 in the morning and immediately the anxiety would hit me because I felt like I was giving him the ammunition to cut me. And so I was waiting the second I walked into the complex for someone to tap me on the shoulder to say, hey, he wants to see you, which means he's going to cut me. So like the moment I got in there, the anxiety was there. And then when he didn't cut me and I didn't get the tap on the shoulder and I got a chance to sit in meetings, well, we're sitting in meetings for 7 hours before we practice. And for those 7 hours, I'm going, Chris, you got to survive another day. Don't drop any balls. You can't get cut. He's going to end the dream. And I'm replaying this message like for 7 hours. So by the time I go out to the field, I'm like literally in knots. I can't
So
even.
how did you get out of that and focus? Like, what technique would you recommend, or did you use to get out of that rumination?
I was able to, at a point where I was a victim, right? And this is what's brutal about being a victim to your circumstances, is that once you conclude that you're a victim, then you convince yourself that you're powerless. And once you convince yourself you're powerless, you will never fight to move forward. You can only retreat. And that's what I was doing. I was trying to hide. Like, literally, I was hiding in practice. I was purposely getting covered in practice so they would not throw me a ball. Like, that's how bad it got for 3 weeks. And I went home one night and I was able to have a rational conversation at the darkest emotional time of my life. And that rational conversation is what brought my power back in 2 minutes.
So you when you were purposely getting covered, meaning you wouldn't let yourself be put in an area where you could actually retrieve the ball. Part of you psychologically was, it was like kind of like a self-deception. You're like, oh, well, I didn't get a chance to fail because that guy was covering me. And so now you don't know whether I could have done it or not. And I think I could have, and I can go to bed knowing that I had what it took, even though we couldn't test it on the field.
So I wouldn't even say it was that, Rom. I would say it was this, that I had such little faith in my ability to execute the end results that I needed to, that I didn't even want to be put in the position to have to. So I consciously was like, I'm okay with getting covered because that's a lesser evil than risking dropping a ball and that ending the dream. So I want to hide. I'm trying to hide right now until I figure out how I can overcome this, because I can't figure this out.
A lot of people have this issue too. And so how did you break through this?
So I went home one night and just literally, it was 3 weeks of feeling this anxiety that was overwhelming. Like, I literally couldn't function. And I went home one night going, how in the heck did I end up here? What just happened? 3 weeks ago, I'm dominating on the field. I love this organization. I love coming to practice. And now all I want to do is not show up for a day. Like, what happened? And that question of what happened led me to very rational thoughts and questions. The first thought was, and question was, I don't like this guy. He's a prick. He has no reason to feel this way about me. And yet he hates me. And I got no respect for this dude. How am I letting this guy change my game? That one question, being rational at a very emotional time, was so sensible. Like, yeah, he doesn't have the power. And then it led me to go, 7 months ago, I didn't know who this guy was. Like, what does he have to do with what I'm doing today? Right? I didn't play for this guy in the first place when I started playing football. What does this guy have to do with me going out and playing my game? And that, in 2 minutes, those questions brought me back to, I have all the power. He has none. How did I give him the power? And tomorrow I'm going to get that power back. I'm going to go get my 7 seconds back, because I'm playing for one reason: to line up against some other guy who thinks he's an alpha dog and can stop me from getting what I want. And he has nothing to do with that game. It's me versus this guy for 7 seconds in front of me. And the next day I went to practice so determined to get that space back that he disappeared. When I lined up for my first route, despite the fact the head coach was right there, like, he disappeared. And I lined up, and the only thing that existed was what was in front of me. And now I understand that it's hyper-focus, intention, connection. And in that moment, everything I did became heightened. And I won. And once I won, I realized that I was taking ownership of this space, right? And then I began doing it over and over and over. And I had to do that for 4.5 years of my 8-year career. Every day I showed up at practice, I had a head coach that wanted to cut me in 2 different places: the Niners and the Washington Commanders, right? Every day. And I had to learn how to play in a space above that, where I could still be the best version of me against the best guys on the planet. And what I was doing while I was doing that was mastering that space. And had I not done that, I would have never gotten to the point where I got cut and then found my way to a Super Bowl.
So what are the techniques and routines that you suggest? Because you coach athletes to bring out the best in them. And how do you develop their inner game? Like, people have these issues, like imposter syndrome is a name for this. People take on responsibility. They're promoted into a role where they're managing other people. How do you coach them through that?
Well, the first thing you do is you help them identify, like, what they've done to inhibit their ability to be free to explore their success, right? And this is one of the things we don't allow ourselves to be, is free, right? You can't find your greatness if you're not liberated. And I had to figure that out, right? Like I didn't read it in a book. Like I was a laboratory experiment. I had to figure it out, right? And the other thing is like your measurement for success. We have been so conditioned to measure success by the endpoint in our lives, right? And anything leading up to that point is considered a failure. Well, we've been misled in that regard. It's not considered a failure, right? Like anytime I'm not getting what I want, if there's movement forward, there's still success in that movement forward. So rather than define it as failure, it truly is falling short. And in our culture, there's stigmas tied to failure that are very inhibitive, right? And very destructive for us emotionally. And once we convinced ourselves that we failed, despite the fact that you hear it all the time in business, hey, I failed before I succeeded. And no. That's an easy thing to rationalize when you found success. But if you haven't found success yet, like it's a problem. So the first thing you have to do is identify like the thinking that you've had that has held you back. And in the case of an athlete,
that you tell yourself.
Yes.
Identify that and address that.
Yes, like in the case of an athlete, and really most people, because I do life coaching as well, it's this judgment. We've been conditioned to judge. And that's where it all begins. For an athlete, it really starts with perfectionism. They convince themselves they have to be perfect just by default. And that's where the judgment stems from, right? But we judge in our own lives. We're measuring ourselves against other people. We never developed a sense of self, right? So we self-criticize all the time, and we're never going to be enough. And so the first thing that we have to do is identify the thoughts and the toxic emotions that are inhibitors in our life. That's the first thing. And then once you've understood that, then you need to redefine like what success is, what happiness is, what development is, like what game you really want to win, not just in life, but in sports. Like what game do I really want to win? Right. And stop being measured by the end result, right? Like this is really important, because if you don't redefine that, then you can't confront the negative thoughts.
So right? How do you redefine that, or how do the athletes you work with reframe their definition of success?
They take control of their inner dialogue by understanding a new definition of what success is and what their real game is that they're playing. The game that you're always playing is with you, but we've convinced ourselves that it's against the universe. It's against what we want.
I agree. Your worst enemy is yourself. That's how it is.
Yeah. And here's the biggest thing. People have not spent time with themselves. They don't. And even young people today, it's even worse. They're so distracted with the phone. They're on social media all the time. They spend very little intimate time with themselves. So my question becomes like, if you're not spending intimate time with yourself, defining who it is you want to be and why, right? So that you can create your own value system, then you will never develop the sense of self. And if you've never developed the sense of self, the challenges are going to constantly be around you. Like you are never going to be able to in full overcome the challenges, because you're living for the universe. Like you're hoping that the universe is going to tell you that you've been successful, that you're worthy, that you're visible, like all these things that we all want, that you're relevant, right? Like we all want that, but you want it for the wrong reasons. You're giving the universe power to tell you whether you're valuable or not, when really that should have always come from you internally. So the first thing people have to learn, and this is what I teach my athletes, is you have to start spending intimate time with yourself. You have to start like being okay with who you are and defining who it is that you want to be and creating your own value system around that. That's what I've done. I don't need the universe to tell me that Chris Thomas is valuable. I've decided what that value system is. I'm committed to it. It makes me feel amazing about who I am. And every morning I wake up, I'm inspired by that. And I'm going to give that to the universe, but the universe gets to decide what they want to do with that. So this is what I teach people, is that this is about you falling in love with you first and foremost. You have to define the self. Once you do that, then you have the power to confront the negative thoughts, to confront the toxic thinking, because no longer are you willing to like listen to the inner dialogue that was negative and prohibitive. Now you're willing and ready to confront the negative dialogue. So when the negative thoughts come in that make me question myself or what I'm doing or who I am, I can confront it, because I now have a different definition of what success is, what happiness is, what I want for my life, and who I am.
So in the moment, what happens in your mind? Do you have like a gratitude exercise, or do you say, I stand for being a good father, I live my life by integrity, I'm going to do the best I can, and then see what happens? Like, are there affirmations that you are saying, or how do you combat the negative talk?
There's 100% affirmations for sure. So it has to start in the morning, right? And then that has to continue throughout the day. Like we spend all our time on what we don't like about our lives and what's not working out. We spend no time about what we appreciate, what we're grateful for, and who we are, right? That we love. So 100%, like you have to wake up with those affirmations in the morning. Like, what do I love about who I am? There's not one person on this planet who is attempting to be a good human being that cannot find valuable assets that they know is good for nurturing the soil upon which we live. That would make them feel great about who they are. Not one. So it's saying, I love the fact that I'm kind. I love the fact that I'm selfless. I love the fact that I'm spiritual. I love the fact that I want you to succeed as much as I want it for myself. I love the fact that I have this great sense of humor. I love the fact that I'm aware of moments where I could add something to your life, be it opening a door for you, giving you a smile. I love the fact that that's who I am. This makes me feel great about who I am. So it's recognizing those attributes from the moment you wake up and having an awareness that I don't want to just recognize that in the morning. I want to recognize that throughout the day. And what you find is that when that becomes your rehearsal, then you start cutting off the negative thoughts before they can even surface. So at some point, you won't even have to fight the negative inner dialogue, right? But until you do, what happens is when those negative thoughts come in that I'm not worthy, this isn't going to happen for me. It's like you confront it with, well, why aren't you worthy? Really? Like, I know I have assets that contribute. I know I have reasons that this will succeed. And then you need to express those, right? And this is the confrontation. I'm no longer willing to accept these inhibitive thoughts because I know now I've defined where it is I want to go in my life, right? And that success starts internally.
You've trained your mind and you have a practice to train your mind.
Yes.
And you develop responses so that your mind can combat that dialogue.
100%, because we've been conditioned to have those negative thoughts.
And, some people are more visual than others. I mean, you talked about having a role model growing up, some people more auditory than others. So an affirmation can help. Other people are more kinesthetic. So a walk in nature for me is very effective. If I am trying to solve a major problem, there's a lake nearby, I just look out at the lake and the trees, and that helps me recenter.
Yeah, for me, it's music. Like, I love music. Music gets me connected to my spirit, right? It gets me quiet. It gets me introspective, right? Which, again, if you don't like yourself, are you really going to be very introspective? You know what I mean? It's like, you're not going to spend that reflective time with yourself. So, sorry, go ahead, Ron.
No, go ahead. So I get, just to play it back. So yeah, it's finding the inner validation, not the validation from others. It's self-love. It's training your mind. This concept of like the monkey mind. The mind will focus, run around, and create all sorts of issues unless it's tamed. It's a good tool, but it's not who we are. It's not our identity. The mind just does its own thing. And like my son, who's a 3-year-old monkey, I love him to death, but he needs some discipline, he needs some training too. And that's what you have a practice that enables you to kind of self-cultivate.
Yeah, because the mind can't be left to do its own thing because it will betray you because of how we've been cultivated to think, the things that we believe, right? A lot of those things are toxic and they're detrimental to our ability to be, balanced emotionally, spiritually, in life. Like when we pursue success, right? Like we're obviously achieving things as professional athletes that a very small percentage of people ever achieve. So you're very focused on that, myopic in your pursuit of that. But at the same time, that can't be the definition of you. It has to be an end goal, but it can't be the definition of you. Because if it's the definition of you, you lose something in that. This is why creating goals are amazing. Having these ambitions are amazing, but they can't be the definition of you. They have to be the motivation for the journey towards it.
It's a journey over destination.
Yeah, it can't be the definition of you. And for many of us, it is. And so we get so caught up with that so many other things get lost in translation in the process of all of that. And so even when you get there, it's compromised, right? Like there's something that's compromised.
Well, they're still lacking. They're looking for something else.
That's exactly it.
I had a chat with Don Hanfield last week. He said the same thing. He's like, look, you think that when you achieve success, that the inner hole will be filled. And no, that's not what happens. There's still other issues that are there. So it's finding that spark from within. How do you, by the way, I think that's it's really, really beautiful. Another statement, by the way, that comes to mind is, It's our brokenness that allows the light to flow out and flow in too. So,
Well, that becomes the other question is like, why have we never accepted our imperfection as people? Like, why have we never accepted that? It's that lack of acceptance. Acceptance is maybe one of the most powerful words you will ever hear. Acceptance, awareness, and perspective. But acceptance is one of the most powerful words because honestly, the lack of acceptance is what creates the most emotional distress for people.
well, the suffering comes from the thoughts in people's heads, not their physical circumstances. It's the
100%.
themselves.
And so that comes from what's been cultivated in you, whether that's consciously or subconsciously, right? It's what you've been bombarded with as you've been growing up to believe. That's created your foundation of belief, right? And so unfortunately, for much of that, you've been misled, right? And it's only been destructive in your pursuit forward towards the things that you want, relationships, professional, your professional job, whatever, the way you interact with people, like everything, right? Your spiritual balance, like you've lost so much in that. And there's a huge compromise. And that compromise, as you pointed out, that gap is huge. And you think that external things or external value is going to, or feedback is going to, be the reason why you forget about who you are. But that can't be. Like that needs to be people's reception of you.
Yeah.
The success that you're achieving, be it emotionally, spiritually, like literally in your professional lives, whatever you're achieving should be a byproduct, right? That should be a byproduct.
Right. I think the other part is, especially in the current younger generation, like Gen Z, Gen Zoomer, is you have parental validation is what kids look for now. It's another variation like on the kind of trophy culture. And people will commit fraud or crimes to validate and secure parental love. We saw them in the crypto industry with like SBF and all this stuff.
Yes. And parents, by the way, don't always, I think that, parents function on the opposite ends of the spectrum and everything in between, but you have the extremes, right? You have the parent who is living vicariously through their kid. And I can give you an example of that with a tennis kid right now. This kid is out there and he's young, he's 18. He's out there playing tennis nonstop. That's his life. He wants to go professional if he can before he goes to college. But if he can't, he has a backup plan. He's already committed to a really good tennis university. But his father is literally destroying his experience with the game, like destroying. Before he even is playing, he's telling him not to screw something up. When he loses in the first round, he's telling him, he's let everybody down and he's a waste of an investment. Like, why are we paying this money? It's like he is the most destructive force in his life when he should be the most supportive force in his life, because when it's all said and done, the relationship is deeper than what your kid is as an athlete, right? You want this relationship to be sustainable until you die, right, as a parent. But he's like the extreme. And then you have other parents who just simply want to support the success of their child, but they may not even realize the language that they're using has negative connotations to it, or they're saying things that are actually destructive and promote anxiety.
What's an example of that?
Like a dad saying, "Hey, today, go out there and just go get your hits, and like you want to make sure you get your hits today, and not strike out." So that might be something that they say, "Hey, I want your goal to be you need to go get hits today and not strike out today, and just go out there and be confident."
Right.
Say it.
Don't fail, in other words.
Yeah, basically, right? And so they might mean that in a positive way, like, hey, they don't mean it in a negative way. They're just saying, hey, go out there and get your hits and just don't strike out today. And I know that you're good enough to not strike out, so just don't worry about it and just go play. And, it sounds good on the surface, but really what you got them thinking about was try not to strike out, right? Like, and that's not the game. The game isn't to try not to strike out, say in baseball. It's to attempt to barrel a ball and draw these lines, right? Like that's the game you want to win, particularly in baseball, because you don't control the outcome. You can do everything right. And this is probably baseball's the greatest metaphor for life. You can do everything right as a hitter, everything that should make everything you did feel like an A+, or that you were 1 for 1 and you're batting 1,000. But if you're focused on the end result, which is it could result that you did everything right, hit the perfect line drive, but right to the center fielder who caught it for an out. If you're focused on the end result, that moment feels like a failure, right? And this is the personal destruction right here. If that's been reinforced in your head in a negative way, does that make sense?
Right, right. It does make sense. Let's zoom out for a moment now. So in the Super Bowl, what does that experience mean for the average person? Make that real for us.
Oh man. Well, for one, just getting there. Like you work for months, right? It's not
Yeah.
just once the playoffs start, right?
Right.
They've been setting a pathway for this dating back to the draft, right? Which happens in April, right? You're not playing the Super Bowl until February, right? Like it's been going on for months, and so many things have to go right for that to happen. It's not just about, are we a good team?
Right.
So many things have to go right, namely injuries, right? And just tying everything together with scheme. But, in our case, like it was so dramatic because, we had won our first round of the playoffs, but the second round came down to literally like the last play of the game. And we made this game-winning catch that basically put us in front of the opponent. And then they had no ability to go down and score. So we knew we were going to the Super Bowl. And it was like a dream for a couple of reasons. One, I was a Rams fan. So here I am about to go to the Super Bowl with the Rams, right? And that was unreal. But two, I wasn't even supposed to be there. Like I shouldn't have even been there. I was with the Washington Redskins to start that season, or Washington Commanders to start that season. And I was going in my third year there. And the coach there had wanted to cut me every day that I was there, the same as the coach in San Francisco. And I pulled my hamstring the second game of the season, and he finally got his chance to do it. And I was devastated. I'm like, it's kind of like being in that bad relationship, right? Where you're like, a bad relationship is better than no relationship, right? That's how a lot of people feel. So they stick out a bad relationship. But like I got cut and I was devastated, even though it was a horrible situation for me for almost 3 years. And the reason I was devastated is because I just gotten married, just bought my first house, found out my wife was pregnant, and now I'm out of a job. And all of a sudden I'm going, I don't know what to do now. It's over. I'm completely lost. And the phone rings the next day. It's the Rams. And it's a coach that used to be with the Redskins who's now there. And he said, hey, we're going to have a guy suspended for 4 weeks. We're going to have to sign somebody temporarily for those 4 weeks. I want it to be you. When you get your hamstring healthy, I want you to come here and work out and show these guys that already know about you. Got healthy, went there for a workout, worked out against another former first-round wide receiver who had played for the Broncos. We were supposed to fly in for a one-day workout, fly home. We go work out, and I get the opportunity. I get the job. And so I'm there, and the next week they sign me, and I'm there for 4 weeks. And I do everything I can in those 4 weeks to convince them that I'm good enough to maybe stay there, even though I know that's not realistic. And as my 4 weeks are up, I'm going into the Friday before my last game there, and I know I'm getting cut after that because the other guy who got suspended is coming back. And I approach the head coach and say, hey, coach, thank you for allowing me to be here for these 4 weeks. You have no idea what this meant for me. I love my time here. I just can't thank you enough. And he says, you're welcome. You've shown me a lot. Because you have, I'm going to do something I did not expect to do. I'm going to keep you here, and I'm going to cut somebody I really like in order to do that. So I wasn't even supposed to be there on that team. Like he ended up keeping me, and next thing you know, we're in the Super Bowl. So we go to the Super Bowl, and it is a celebration that if you could picture Mardi Gras, that is pretty much what's happening for the entire week that you're there, right? And it's the most insane experience to go through because it almost seems surreal. Like it's a dream of every kid who's ever touched a football field to be in this moment. And for us, it was such a dramatic game because it came down to literally the last play where it looked like the opponent like reached the ball over the end zone line, but he did not. And had he done that, they score a touchdown, kick the extra point, we go into overtime. But he was literally this far away from the end zone line. So it's almost like you don't believe it for a second, right? When you're there, you're like, wait, the referees are saying this, but did we really just win? Like, there's no way we just won. And then all of a sudden, the blue and yellow confetti starts raining down from the top of the dome, and it's everywhere, and everyone's going nuts. And you're like, oh my gosh, we just won. And the first thing I wanted to do was go in the stands and find my mom and hug her. As it was such an emotional thing, and it was the only thing I could think to do to express my gratitude for all the sacrifices she made for this kid, 7-8-year-old kid with a dream to be achieving the pinnacle of the sport. It was unreal, like to go through that.
Must have been a beautiful moment. what happens like the night before you're playing the Super Bowl? Like, how do you make sure you can fall asleep? I would be up the entire night with insomnia to like 7 a.m. and not in the best mental state.
You are, yeah. I mean, because let's be real about it, right? Like it all comes down to this, and how often you get this close to achieving the pinnacle, right?
Right.
Like, and so
Is everyone wired? Like, or do you have like a sleep routine, or how do you make sure that
you have a sleep routine that is 100% disrupted. Like I don't think anybody gets a good night's sleep before
no
the game.
no one sleeps well before the Super Bowl?
No way. And it made it even worse for me because my roommate, he was a snorer, so he snored like a polar bear. And so I wasn't getting sleep anyway. But no, I would tell you that I think what happens when you're laying there is you're fantasizing and seeing exactly how you anticipate the game going and your role.
Visualizing.
You're visualizing your role. You're visualizing all the things that you have to do. You're visualizing the scheme, visualizing the plays, visualizing, the defense and how they're going to play you and all the film work that you've done that can make your game easy because of preparation. So you're visualizing you're not visualizing things not working out. You're visualizing everything working out.
Right. Focus on success. Now, the night that you win the game, does everyone just kind of break, go home, celebrate, or do you go to like a club? Do you
No.
What happened?
In our hotel. So yeah, when you win, right, and you're out on the field forever because you're on the stage and everyone's getting interviewed and stuff like that. But when you eventually get back to the hotel, right, like they've already rented out like every conference room that exists in that hotel. So there was the biggest party you could have ever imagined. They bring in artists. I don't remember who the artists were, but artists who are there singing at your own private party for all the families of all the players and all the organization and all the food you can imagine. It was an absolute circus. Like so many people there. It was like being at a Coldplay concert or something, but there were so many people there and they've already set it up, right? Like they've set it up for you to win.
And what about the team? They've got that going on as well, right? They're celebrating anyway because they already lined up all the vendors in the space.
I would say they're definitely not celebrating the same way, but
yeah. They're not high five. Like, hey,
yeah.
Next year, fist bump.
Yeah, they're definitely not celebrating the same way. But I mean, that party went on till we had to go jump on the plane to like fly back to St. Louis to get ready for the parade. That's how it worked. It basically was we're up all night.
Wow. So you're
partying with family.
The next day. Can't really
get no sleep. You go to the airport, you jump on the plane, you get back to St. Louis, and the first thing you do is you're getting on trucks to go downtown for the downtown parade in front of 500,000 people, right? Which is insane. Just to see what it means to the city. I mean, that is almost as special as anything else. The fact that people are coming out in 23-degree weather in February because they just want to see you roll by in the truck and celebrate this moment that you brought to the city and to the Rams. Like to see the look on their face and the expression and just the gratitude and the love was something you'll never forget.
So what happens after that? So, afterwards, you started after your NFL career, you built a business. And, I think other athletes aren't able to transition as successfully as you have. In the investing world, we see this where they make lousy decisions or they spend way too much money. There's stories of Shaquille O'Neal buying 3 luxury cars to prove that he could. Right. So could you share a bit more about like the investing side for athletes? And I guess related to that, I'm sure you saw the article about how college athletes can not only earn money now from sponsorship, but there's also insurance contracts out to protect in case they're injured. Just the economics of football. And
guys have done that forever. The Lloyds of London, contracts that they get out, in case they get hurt, right? Because there's certain earnings power they're going to have had they made it in the NFL. So, players get that on themselves, but also you have organizations that also get that on players as well. So I would tell you that it's a slippery slope. In my day and age, there weren't a lot of guys investing their money in a way that was forward thinking, right? And you have to understand too, Ram, that I'm a little bit different in that football never was the definition of Chris Thomas. It was something that I loved, but it was never the definition. For a lot of athletes who get there, it is the definition. So as you kind of pointed out, like if it's a definition of who you are, then you're going to want to show people that you've made it, right? And so rather than invest in your future in potentially changing generations to come, You're going to invest in showing people that you've made it, right? So the investment is in cars and jewelry and the $250,000 necklace that you're wearing and buying your family this and that and your entourage and everyone else. And there's a price to pay for that. So you're investing in the wrong things that are unsustainable, because once the game's over and the money's no longer coming, you've done nothing to prepare for what's next, especially if the game defines you. But I think today guys are a lot more forward thinking. And it's different as well, because you know for a fact that the money's coming, because so many contracts, when you sign lengthy contracts, are guaranteed now, a large portion of them. So you know that money's coming. So now I think a lot of guys are thinking more about investing in businesses, starting their own businesses, not just investing in the stock market.
Effective at that.
Yes, not just investing in the stock market, investing in real estate, and clearly they have a lot of people around them that are smart, that can help them, create that, right? But I think a lot of guys realize now, where they didn't before, that it is a business, right? It is a business. And in that business, you need to be thinking about your future as much as an organization is thinking about theirs. And so, yes, they're thinking about it. And I love the way athletes are thinking about it now, because again, they're not just thinking about, let me just invest in the stock market. They're thinking about layers, right? Layers of sustainable revenue streams, right? And not just for today, for potentially generations to come. And the contracts have gotten so lucrative that you can be thinking about generations to come.
Any thoughts on Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce? Like, we'll talk about like super couple and social media. Taylor Swift shows up in a city and it creates an economic boom that the Federal Reserve talks about. She's influencing elections on the margin, some say.
Yeah, if she's influencing elections, we got a problem, but that's a whole other topic, right? But I don't even think of them as a couple. I just kind of think of Taylor Swift and then Travis Kelce, despite the fact that I get that they're a couple. And honestly, she was great for the NFL. I mean, and they know that. Let's not be naive. They know that, which is why they're on her all the time. Right. And I feel bad for Taylor Swift, because it's not like she's asking for the media attention. They understand the value that she brings to the NFL. So that's why they're on her all the time. And you have all these people that hate the Chiefs and don't like Travis Kelce anymore because of how much they show Taylor Swift. They're like, they're over her, right? But she's only been just Taylor Swift. She's not asking to be visible, right? And so I feel bad for her in that regard. And honestly, I'd be curious to know how much she knows about the game, before she started dating Travis Kelce. Because I'd be really impressed if it turns out that she knew a lot about football before, Travis Kelce ever came into her life.
She's probably seen a few games there. So super interesting. Now, where you are today, you're focused on training athletes and helping to bring out the best in themselves. Do you want to share more about the amazing influence you've had on others? And could you ever imagine yourself doing that today?
So no, I joined Merrill Lynch as a financial advisor when I left the game, right? I was there for 14 years. And while I was there, I was working with athletes on the side, and it was kind of my own spiritual, release, right? That it was great for my spirit to be able to give people something I didn't even know I had. I mean, I had no idea that I had really mastered the mental component of performance and really life in many ways, until I was asked to give something of myself to somebody else. Because when I was in it, it was a survival tactic. Like, I didn't have time to diagnose what I was doing, what I was embracing. I didn't have time to analyze it. But when I was asked to work with someone else, I then theorized kind of all the things that I learned and gave it to them in this model. And that model turned out to be life-changing and transformative for so many athletes. And so, no, I could not have imagined it, but I know that this is my purpose. And so we have to take clues, by the way, of our past experiences. Only 20 years later did I know that what I went through with the Niners was meant to happen, right? Only then did I know it was meant to happen for me to be where I am today, because I was meant to impact other people's lives. And this is what I mean about success. Like, I am achieving success every day. I'm with somebody and helping them become someone they've never been. And it goes deeper than just doing that on the field. What you're really doing is you're empowering people to take ownership of the experiences that they're having. Like, that permeates every aspect of your life, the way you're going to be a professional, the relationships you're going to establish, spiritually, the way you function. Like, this is why most people say you're changing my life, not just my game. And it's why I do life coaching. In addition, I consult with a ton of athletes, and I consult with people who are non-athletic. I've done keynote speaking for businesses. And really now I think in 2024 open to like creating a model for the workforce, right? And for people to really be able to take this model and apply it to the way that they function every day of their professional life and really their own personal life, parenting, right? And how differently you parent.
Your son is an emerging athlete as well. I've got 2 boys and a daughter. What's your philosophy and approach to parenting, just given the experience you had growing up, without a dad, and the inner game, and ensuring that you cultivate the right self-talk? If you were to give me a few pieces of advice, what would they be?
I would tell you to really look at success from a totally different lens, right? Like the hunger has to be there for people to be motivated to continue moving forward into the unknown and making themselves vulnerable, because that's what they're doing. Second, you engage in sports, you're making yourself vulnerable to the unknown, right? You're giving other people the chance to scrutinize you, and chastise you.
I mean, any form of competition.
Yeah, now you're open to scrutiny, right? And so we become aware of that. And so the best thing you can do is teach your child how to play a game with themselves, right? This is about you. That's what the best athletes on the planet do. They're not playing for everybody, they're playing for themselves. And
it's so true. I 100% resonates. And that creates the internal drive and motivation to do better.
Yes.
You're holding yourself accountable, but you also have this kind of game mindset as well, which is this is an easier way to navigate life, where not being overly hard on yourself.
And in that game, you've accepted your imperfections, because in that game, there is no loser. You never lose, right? So as a parent, it's so important for you to frame this experience in a way where there is no loss. You can only find victory. Even in the moments I don't get what I want, there can be victory to be found that creates momentum and hunger and a desire to go be free to pursue the success that I want. Because most athletes don't feel free. They're scared, right? They're inhibited. And so my son,
not just athletes, most people are scared and inhibited. Should I start that company? Should I ask for that promotion? Should I ask that person out on a date? There's fear of inhibiting a lot of people from a better life.
And this goes back to acceptance, by the way. If there was an acceptance there of what the worst case scenario would be, then we could focus all our attention on what we actually want. Think about that, right? That's why I told you about acceptance. Like once I accept certain realities that I could strike out, that she might say no, that it might not work if I pursue this. Like once I accept that, then I can actually focus my energy on exactly what I want. Like now I give myself an even greater chance of getting what I want when 100% of my energy is in support of that. Like this is where you change everything about your life and about your sports experience, because now you're taking ownership. Like you're the one who's creating the game and there is no loss, right? And I'm free, because if I can't lose, why would I be inhibited?
That's fascinating. In investing, there's this concept called loss aversion, where people fear gains more than an equivalent loss. And that fear of loss aversion causes them to make bad decisions and probably causes more losses. Like they'll sell at the bottom of a market, for example. So that's a really interesting way to think about it. How to identify and address the fears and neuter them and accept. And any things you do to inculcate that concept of acceptance as a parent?
I think realizing that like every experience I have, that I have the power to create what I want from it. And it starts with me. Like if I can't accept certain realities in my everyday experience, then I'm going to be imprisoned by the lack of that acceptance, because something's going to hold me back in every single thing that I do.
What are those certain realities? Like what if one of those realities, like a limiting belief, like I'm pretty sure I can't be a wide receiver on a football team. I'm pretty sure that belief is accurate. But maybe there are other examples which are on the margin, where someone believes they can start a business, build a successful business, hire great people, but they're doubting themselves because they've never done it before.
Yeah, so it would be like, well, first I'd have to ask myself, well, why? Where is the doubt coming from? So that would be the first question. Well, what am I doubting, and what is the worst case scenario? And then I have to look within and go, well, what are my assets? What is my contribution? Why do I believe that this could work? Why do I believe people would want to come work for me? Why do I believe this is a good product? Right? Like, so then I have to become realistic about like, well, I had this idea for a reason. Like, well, why? Because once you answer that why, then you can confront like the doubts, right? Then I can go, well, I see that I have every reason to create success in this pursuit. I see that now. So then what I have to do now is accept the worst case scenario as a wide receiver. I want to be an NFL wide receiver. Okay, well, you might not be equipped to be an NFL wide receiver, but could you be great in your own realm and in your own regard from your start to finish in regards to what you want? Well, yeah, of course. So then why are you measuring your success by becoming an NFL wide receiver? This is why you're inhibited, because in your head, you're telling yourself, I got to be that or else I'm nothing. Well, no, you don't. Like, you need to accept that you might never be that guy. And once you accept it, you can focus on where you are today and where that's going to take you tomorrow. We need to be in the moment. We're so not in moments. We don't live in moments. And if we lived in moments, we would celebrate so much of our lives, because in multiple moments throughout the day, I mean, thousands of moments throughout the day, you would have these amazingly perfect moments that you would recognize and celebrate with gratitude. And imagine how your whole perspective and mindset would change if you lived in a moment and you celebrated moments for what they were.
I agree. And it's a beautiful daily practice to remind ourselves of, especially those of you who have good health, healthy family, healthy kids. I agree. I mean, just to recap, so, you start with a role model, an idea, someone you can look up to, you formulate a vision, the vision inspires you, you embrace failure, learning and growth. You got to control the inner dialogue, and coaching can help you with that. Affirmations can help you with that. Different practices can help you with that. You got to be naive enough to bet on yourselves, but also accept the unknown and lean into that. Self-inquiry can help, like a Socratic dialogue, to break down the problem and assess it, as opposed to letting your emotions make a decision. And get a coach, get a mentor, that can help. I do think it's a lot easier to talk through issues out loud with someone versus walk around silently and get in a broken thought loop in one's own head. So with that said, we got to call it a wrap, but thank you so much, Chris. Really appreciate your time. Looking forward to next time. Chris, I'll never forget the workouts we had way back when. My legs are still sore from those experiences. They really were intense. I cherish the suffering, though. I took a lot from that. So thank you so much for everything you do.
No, I appreciate you, brother. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate you.
My pleasure. Likewise, Chris. Thank you.